Good afternoon, dear all. I would like to welcome you to the third session, Socialism and Markets. I'm Professor Philipp Bagus. I'm here in Madrid at home, and I would like to present you the three presenters understood from the Karl Menger Center, Budapest. Andras was presenting also at other conferences here in Madrid. He will present about Karl Polanyi. Then we have Jorge Bueso-Merino. He will talk very timely about Mises impossibility theorem. Jorge was a master student in Austrian economics here at our university, Rey Juan Carlos. He's doing now his PhD. And the last paper is written by Sonja Tickelbeck and Professor Lev Dirks. It's about, it goes into the direction of behavioral economics. Sonja was just admitted as a PhD candidate here at Universidad Rey Juan Carlos. And I'm very happy that we have such a great panel here. So the same procedure as in the last sessions, 15 minutes of presentation and then 5 minutes of discussion. So Andras, if you are ready to go, please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, I am speaking from Soria, which is in Castilla y León. Beautiful city, no seaside, no sand, cold. So the best place to work, especially now because there is no bars open. So what I'm trying to speak now is about Karl Polanyi and about his famous book, The Great Transformation. And I changed the title because the title is The Great Contradiction of the Great Transformation. I mean, The Great Transformation is one of the most known books of Karl Polanyi. It contains one of the most popular anti-market and pro-socialist great narratives, a vision of socialism which could ensure planning, redistribution, and freedom. Now, the key tenet of the presentation, the anti-capitalist and pro-socialist great narrative of Polanyi is due to intellectual dishonesty, which allowed him to sketch a one-sided great narrative. So just a few words about the great narrative of the great transformation. Polanyi thought that the world has a kind of V-shaped development of human civilization, which contain three phases. The first phase, trade and market, is controlled by community, customs by state, from hunter-gatherers to merchants in the 19th century. Control of state on communities, and human beings are prey of rigid and inhuman laws of market, which does not value human life and needs. This is the Marxist influence. But he says there is an inherent contradiction of capitalism. Labor, land, and money are fictitious commodities. They are not produced for sale. Laissez-faire civilization, but its inherent contradiction leads to state intervention, and this is it is a borrowed from Mises' inevitable demise of market economy, and coming the third phase, which is rule of planning, redistributed, regulative state, socialism in the best case. Now, here comes the great breaking point in the great narrative. In the last pages of the last chapter of the book, in which he discusses socialism, Polanyi argues that alongside planning, there has to have a role for subordinated markets. And then suddenly he has a sentence. Markets continue to various fashions to ensure freedom of consumers, to indicate the shifting of demand and to influence producers' income. I mean, anybody familiar with the Austrian economics, this is the market and price theory of Mises. And a few pages later, he says, economic useful. This is the subjective value theory of Menger. And surprise, surprise, he is not referencing this Austrian insight in his work. And this is the great contradiction of the great transformation. His great narrative on the the nature of capitalism and the necessity of socialism was based on the unbearable consequences of the Marxist concept of commodification of labor, where free market is a prison which does not respect human life and values. By envisioning ideal socialism, his value theory of choice is that of Mengelen, which ensures freedom, and his price theory of choice is that of Mises, as markets are ensuring freedom. So that great contradiction, markets could not be only prisons, but at the same time are key institutions for ensuring freedom. And then here in the last chapter, there is a tacit shift of meaning of ideal society in his vision of ideal society. During the whole great transformation, during 250 pages, his theory was built on a beautiful description of hunter-gatherer tribes and the extension of their practices as a key features until the 19th century. Compared to that picture, capitalism was described as profit-seeking, individualized, and marketized complex society of satanic mills and earthly hell. By discussing socialism, Polanyi shifted the problematization of what is a good society. He states that there won't be return to non-hierarchical, equal small communities based on natural division of labor. Socialism will be a complex society, a state-dominated society, and still state will use power to compensate preferences, and there will be unequal access to power. So the key issue becomes for him how to ensure individual freedom against the supreme power of the state. This is the problem of Adam Smith, and including Mises, classical liberals. And he had three key areas where to ensure individual freedom: economic life, institutional management, and moral foundation of socialism. As we have seen in the economic life, he tries to maintain markets based on Menger and Mises, because he says markets are ensuring freedom. But this is completely undermines the preceding chapters where markets were portrayed as prison of individuals. And also we have an unresolved problem here. If coexistence of markets and society and interventionist state is unstable construct, why thinks Polanyi that coexistence of planning state and markets are stable construct? I mean, Stalin knew better. In 1928, he argued that there has to be a coexistence because private farmer is kind of fruit for capitalism. As an institutional thing, he says, we need habeas corpus to ensure individual freedom. He said, the side product of economic individual rights. His great silence about the state of servitude before liberalism, which described as almost irrelevant. And the third, when he began to speak about the moral condition of freedom and socialism, he says, Christianity and this discovery of individual is the key feature of Western tradition since Jesus Christ. This is again a key element which was not at all mentioned in the historic chapter and not explored the relationship between classical liberalism and Christianity. So what does this mean, intellectual dishonesty in this case? That we have a one-sided narrative. If markets key for individual freedom, Polanyi couldn't argue that markets are only prisons in the historic chapters. If classical liberalism ensured individual freedom, which he cherished, he could not argue that liberalism was an utopian idea which made impossible to live as a human, especially compared to pre-capitalist societies where laborers were slaves or serfs. And the fruit of individualism is Christianity since the age of Christus Christ, which he cherished. He could not argue that the 18th century liberalism was a ruthless conspiracy against the uninterrupted history of communities. So his great narrative was built on a completely different argumentation, which he himself demolished in the last chapters. And finally, I would like to compare Marx and Polanyi, because both practicized a kind of intellectual dishonesty. I mean, Marx, it's very strong, but I have to say, was an outright liar. Marx, when he published the Capital, the first book of the Capital, which was only published in his life, he knew that his theory of profit as a result of exploitation of labor is in clash of reality. The rate of profit is in relation to capital and not in relation to amount of work. chose to remain silent about this contradiction, which completely undermines the whole edifice of Marx's great narrative. He promised solution in Capital 3, but he already abandoned that manuscript. Barber's masterly revelation of intellectual dishonesty of Marx had enlightened Polanyi. Marx's great narrative is a faulty theory and helped him to escape from the spell of revolutionary orthodox Marxism. But inequalities of capitalism still made him strongly anti-capitalist and believer in a socialist future. Polanyi analyzing capitalism was driven by sacred hate and rose-tinted vision of utopian socialism, the reason for the one-sided great narrative, in which he only concentrated on the negative side of markets and classical liberalism. Still, he had a suppressed fear, knowing what is Stalinism and what is the Stalinist practice. So when in the last chapter, when he began to speak about socialism, he suddenly realized what is the value of classical liberalism, markets, and Austrian economics. So the root of intellectual dishonesty in the case of Polanyi, the suppressed fear. The paper is much longer. This is just a summary in which I try to revisit the Polanyian concept based on Menger and Mises. And the three most important things which I'm trying to say in the paper, that according to Menger, labor is good and not commodity. And what is important in good, that it is property of somebody. And I argue in the paper that the first great transformation took place 6,000 years before Christ, when the first city-states and empires were formed, and there were established the first unequal and complex societies based on the serfdom, on the serfdom of laborers. Working people had fictitious nature of property over their human capital in pre-capitalist civilization based on various forms of serfdoms. And the real importance of the second transformation, which was the liberalism, it allowed regaining the property right by working people over their human capital. And it was real freedom. And this was the real cause of the great flourishment and the amazing development we have. I mean, no wonder that most of the innovators of the industrial revolution were craftsmen, and they were the first factory owners and capitalists. And this is, what I try to do this is demolish completely the Polanyian structure. Thanks very much for that, your attention, and really sorry for the technical mistakes. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Andras. Are there comments or questions concerning the very interesting presentation? Please raise your hand.
Good evening. Excuse me. And thank you. This is my presentation. Value is subjective, individual, and ordinal, a ranking, more than, and marginal, appreciated at the margin. On the contrary, price is cardinal. How we pass from subjective ordinal value to cardinal price with which we can make calculus, compare goods, compare projects, because a bridge appeared historically by several steps, like markets, like Andreas said, it is the side a side product of markets is individual rights, not in the contrary. But in this representation, I try to represent the key moment in the market price formation process. Three points, three main points. The first, we start from valuations, from each actor valuations, comparing this is following von Baber bilateral market for horses, the classical example. And then we start from the valuations of the different actors. Then, second, we go through a process over time with bargaining, proposals, contra proposals, a process which is historical, creative, uncertain, contingent, that is, it is not given. And the process arrives to the market price, which is an interval of valuations, a latitude, as von Baber said, in which we have the same number of sellers and buyers included, and the people who is excluded economically is because they are better being excluded. We have here the effect of supply side competition when 1, 2, 3 to 5 people more enter to the as offerers, and then we see that the market price goes to the left and up and to the left. That is more number of exchanges with a lower price. Then we have more opportunities. But the point is that the market produces more opportunities for everybody. The key point is that it is regulated by a negative feedback mechanism with two sides. If high prices are expected, the people gets attracted to offer and to produce such a market, and then also such a process lowers the price. The other side is that if the expected price or the actual price is low, the producers think in redirecting their activities and their resources to other markets to serve better the consumers. But more opportunities, but what is entre we see here the representation of the simplest elements, the more simple elements of entrepreneurship in the following Huerta de Soto, as David showed before, is we have A that fervently desires, wishes the goal X, but he doesn't know how to do it. He lacks a resource that he doesn't know how to get it or what is. But in other place of the market, there is another people, B, which is following. They desire another goal, very different. Why? Even contradictory with A's goal, but he has or knows when it is or something like that, a resource R that he doesn't know how to use in his plan, in his desire, in his goal. But then there is a situation with a profit opportunity, which C, which actor C exercises entrepreneurship, realizes the opportunity, buys the resource B by 3 monetary units and sells C to A. And then the 3 people are happy, and especially A can attain their desired goal. And entrepreneurships results in coordination and knowledge by trial and error process. Knowledge and information emerge both together. It also emerges the information which is needed for more coordination. That is market prices for production goods, and the ways of doing things. And then what is socialism? Socialism is spontaneous interaction prevented coercively. We have down here as barriers and with the bulb closed out. And then if there is not possibility to find an opportunity profit possibility, the agents don't find the coordination situation which need coordination, and then the information don't emerge, nor prices, nor ways of doing things. But does it mean that the socialist proposers think that socialism will be a chaotic place? By the contrary, and will know the information, but really nobody knows how are going they to do that, because they lack the tools for doing that, and then lacking market prices for capital goods, they even cannot know if they get a profit or a loss. They don't know if they are coordinating or the contrary. In the market, if people meet losses, they redirect their resources. In socialism, they don't know if they are coordinating the contrary. What of the factors they are using could be changed or even compare with cardinal numbers two projects. Then this is the point that socialism is an intellectual error and in practically impossible. There is another way that is partial socialist interventionism. Then every step we go away from private property of capital of production goods and of the use of sound money, we go away from rational calculation. And also, as a rule, every intervention leads to less needs satisfied. We can see three main kinds of interventionism. I draw in such a representation as one, as vertical barriers, price fixing or a price floor or a price selling. In every case, we have more or sellers or more buyers. And then another way to select the people must enter. And it can be only by two ways, or by chance or by a new coercion, or a middle way that is personal relations, chronism. Then the second way is horizontal barriers, and it is very similar to monopoly in Rothbardian sense. And we see in such a representation that we have also a lower number of voluntary exchanges, only 3, and the price is determined not by a net gain for the monopolists. The third kind of interventionism is paradoxically resulting in not less exchanges, but more exchanges. And then the boom is set. I have drawn here 2 examples. One is a price ceiling, but when the previous producers are forced to sell their horses, their produce. And then we have 8 exchanges instead of 5 or 3. And the boom is set. The second on the right is fractional reserve that the depository gets an extraordinary advantage, extraordinary exchange capacity. As he goes to the market of horses, he overloads it, surpasses the K function the money has in the regulation of the market. That negative feedback by two sides. And then the limit, the cap limit is overpassed. And then we have more exchanges at a higher price, and some of the buyers excluded. And then is the way in which inflation becomes. And then my conclusions are written here. It is socialist, it's impossible, like stating Mrs. argument, because economic calculation related to production goods is impossible. Partial socialism works by means of unexpected, from restricting price to monopoly. If in the side of restricting price, the market reacts, and then we get results contrary to those decided by the central planners. On the other side, with monopoly, we have the society stratifying and stagnation. Falsifying calculation, it misleads entrepreneurs, distorting resource allocation. We have capital losses from the beginning, even if it is not perceived. But this is in the economic area, when we are working with capital goods. But there is other side of the human action which doesn't need capital goods, economic area around spontaneous institutions like the market, evolve or born in the same way that the market, with respect for each other. Then Mrs. argument translated here is not impossibility, it's not like intervention, but is similar, is improbability. And in the paper, I have added two notes on scientific research, and it is that when requiring or employing capital goods like machines, like resources, we come back to the impossibility area, and then apply the comment of Mrs. Related to nationalized or municipalized companies. I have written here that technical improvements are introduced because their effect in similar private enterprise, or well domestic or well foreign, can be noticed, and because those private industries produce the material for these improvements and give the impulse for their introduction. And the second note is related to the current corona crisis. If the government apply the standard coercive intervention, like trying to prevent the diffusion of the coronavirus by means of forcing everybody, the entire population, to the same practice, it is precluding or hindering subsequent retrospectives, epidemiological studies. But he has not variety of habits, of conducts, and then he cannot take results from such study. And then we have 2 points. In the economic area, the central planner is blind. And in the extra economic area, the central planning, when applied in coercive interventions like that, like shutdown policies, he is blinding himself in order to the basic way for learning himself and other people. Thank you very much, and excuse me.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Please, are there any questions, comments on the presentation and the paper? Please raise your hand and go ahead. Okay, it looks like in the third session participants are already somewhat tired the second time that there are no comments or questions. So let's go ahead with the paper on rationality and human behavior, presented by Lev Dirks and Sonja Tickelbeck. So when you're ready, Sonja, Lev, please go ahead.
All right, to start with, can you see our PowerPoint?
Yes.
Excellent. And without further ado, let's go.
Yeah, good afternoon. And first of all, I would like to thank you for your attention today. I would like to introduce myself quickly. My name is Sonja Tickelbeck, and I'm a research assistant in the project Behavioral Economics at the University of Applied Sciences in Lübeck. And further, I've just become a student in the doctoral program at the Universidad Rey Juan Carlos. So I would like to give you a short impression of our recent work in the field of behavioral economics. Sapere aude. This phrase means dare to know, and this phrase became some kind of a slogan regarding the philosophical age of enlightenment. So Kant's theory of freedom and morality within the basic ideas of educational thought, such as development, learning, education, and also application of reason into human affairs, which goes way back to Aristotle and Plato, for example. So, but the question is, why might this be of any inspiration for economics?
Yeah, Sonja, the presentation does not move. We are still on the first slide.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure if it is a technical issue or.
This one?
Okay.
Does it work now?
Yeah, now it has moved. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So this phrase, dare to know, from the age of enlightenment leads to the question, so why might this be of any inspiration for economics? Simply because there has to be a new image of the human decision-making market. Heuristics in an environment of true uncertainty. So in literature, you often find terms like econs or humans, which should distinguish, on the one hand, the rational market agent from the neoclassical theories, and on the other hand, the human being that is influenced by emotions or subject to bounded rationality and maybe to cognitive limits. But the Homo economicus humanus is not always interested in maximizing utility, as in reality there are information asymmetries and no chance to find the optimal solution because of those information asymmetries. You are not able to have all information you need at once, so you have to make a decision. And so this is satisficing instead of always maximizing utility. Solutions according to Simon. And the image of the Homo economicus still dominates most economic theories. All human decision-making is still satisfying and bounded rational. Irrational behavior. Irrational behavior is often associated or maybe wrongly connected with economic welfare losses. Nevertheless, it can also be a dominant strategy. For example, without irrational behavior, there would be no chances to arbitrage from mistakes others make. Humans are technically able to deal with so-called radical uncertainty in an environment with unlikely events, especially because of their alleged irrational behavioral patterns, such as intuition or emotion-based decisions. Let us get to the human behavior in reality. Since traditional economic models are based on rationality, the type of intelligence that is relevant in an environment of true uncertainty has been neglected so far. To explain it quickly, by true uncertainty, I mean situations like black swan events, when there are simply no objective probabilities to calculate your risk and your return. So this type of intelligence means the ability of the human brain to generate heuristics. And to generate heuristics to cut a long process within the decision-making short. There is the so-called heuristics revolution. And the so-called heuristics revolution focus on what the human brain is able to accomplish. It is not just about biases and systematic mistakes like traditional behavioral concepts might suggest. It is difficult to define those mistakes with regards to perception always being subjective, and so is reality. So humans, within the process of perception, humans focus and filter data within the process of perception. And this makes them able to focus. What if a market agent, for instance, was not able to focus, abstract thinking would simply be impossible. Although abstract thinking is crucial when it comes to using heuristics. The environment changes and uncertainty continuously increases, and market agents need to adjust their strategies. They are some kind exposed to black swan events like the coronavirus or like challenges like central banks' expensive monetary policy. And in that case, fine-tuned risk models are successful, but under risk, not under true uncertainty. When they are facing true uncertainty, when there are no objective probabilities, heuristics, in that case, heuristics are likely to succeed because neoclassical models cannot deal with radical uncertainty. So confusing risk on the one hand with radical or true uncertainty on the other hand leads to illusions of certainty. So to put it simple, you think you know, but you don't know. And this is the source, this might be a big source of mistakes. So, and in this picture, I would like to give you a quick impression about some influencing factors on human decision-making. Narratives, for example, economic narratives. They are figurative and vivid stories in the human mind, causing, for example, euphoria or fear. A narrative could be never invest in the stock market again since the dot-com bubble, because people picture small private investors losing all of their savings at once due to the burst of the bubble. So those pictures are contagious and support herd behavior. An explanation for that might be the functions of the mirror neuron system in the brain. That means investors speaking agents do not necessarily have to make own negative experiences because they adapt. They adapt feelings, they reflect, and they imitate negative, or they adapt negative feelings from others. They don't have to make a negative experience on their own. And this is not just the case in investment decision, but in all other areas of decision making as well. Rational and irrational might be at some point meaningless. The ultimate end of action is always satisfaction of some desires of acting men. So in that sense, all human action is rational, as people act in order to improve their well-being. So the crucial thing here is the definition about improvement of well-being. What is improvement of well-being? It's individual, and it is up to the individual to decide. It cannot be specified or determined by some axioms of economics. Yes, let's get back to perception. Perception, processing and evaluation of information are subjective. So behavioral economics are not inconsistent with the Austrian paradigm, but they both are inconsistent with the neoclassical view. So according to the Austrian utility theory, people act further their what. Yeah, our areas of future research will put a focus on a new image of the human market agent, the human being making economic decisions. So like, for example, how to build private investment strategy in an environment of true uncertainty, or considering heuristics has become absolutely relevant. Because now we know that neoclassical models fail to address real market agent human behavior. Every human being perceives the environment and perceives impressions differently, which on the one hand affects the consciousness, and vice versa, on the other hand, the perception. So the challenge here is consciousness, like, or the rational thinking in the neocortex or the limbic system, which is responsible for processing emotions and the decision-making process. So the challenge is that the consciousness has no fixed spot. And perception and consciousness are shaped through experience and expectations. So this is the so-called qualia, and this means that we do not just absorb information like machines do. We experience and we feel information and connect them immediately with expectations through our subconscious mind. And that's the big difference. With regards to current changes in society and global economy, neither the Homo economicus nor the behavioral economics partly rational human decision maker can be the image of a realistic market agent anymore, at least not when it comes to financial decision making. The agent of traditional behavioral economics is basically prone to biased judgment and suffers from systematic errors. But there must be some kind of quasi-rational market agent, and that seems made more suitable in the present environment of true uncertainty, facing black swan events like coronavirus, or dealing with modifications in private investment behavior due to the central bank's monetary policy. And this quasi-rational market agent is capable of using efficient heuristics in an environment, expectation to changing environmental factors, and so on. And this agent is always questioning and reflecting experiences, and therefore increasing individual utility and welfare. So in my future research, I would like to focus on the question, how exactly does this new quasi-rational market agent implement and modify efficient heuristics in his mind? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonja. Are there questions, comments on this very interesting presentation? And I think it's also very important to deal with these issues because these behavioral economists, they have a good point in criticizing neoclassical economists, but they also pose a danger because they seem to justify here this paternalism, no, libertarian patternism. Okay, other questions? There's one question.
I would like to.
Yeah.
May I have a comment?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, do not rational or very much is under the impact of Max Weber also. He also emphasized rational action as a main theme for modern times. But I think if we speak about Austrian economics, and especially about Menger and to a certain and Mises also, in Menger, the most important thing is not only the rational action in the bargaining situation, when you have to decide between two horses and one cow, but in the first chapters of the Principle of Economics, his main emphasis on knowledge extension. So the ability of human being to be able to discover and to find out new ideas. And I think this is absolutely missing. I didn't hear too much about your presentation. And to a certain extent, Schumpeter also saying, building on Menger, that innovation is irrational. Because the rational would be remain within the accepted frame and there to find something a bit better position. But he says, no, the real issue is for entrepreneurs and for market actors who are acting entrepreneurially, is to innovate, to get an idea, a new idea, and to enter the market with that new idea. And I think this is a very important, and that a bit different than the neoclassical in general, which sometimes Austrian economics is put into this bracket. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, there's one question in the chat that I can read from David Mega. Doesn't the problem with the Austrian definition of rationality relies on its praxeological assumption that preferences change over time, that they can be different at every moment?
Well, just to fill in perhaps, Philip, of course, referring to what Mr. Mega had said, yes, what we have done here is we are in the process of basically composing the idea which shall keep us busy over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. And therefore, of course, one of our tasks and challenges, I admit, is currently to define not only what type of economic man we have, to what extent this economic man is of a bounded rationality, is perhaps of what we receive to be a subjective rationality, and of course, whether or not we strive to maximize utility within the strict sense of neoclassics, or perhaps whether we better adopt the idea of one Ludwig von Mises saying that by definition, whatever you choose to enhance your welfare cannot be considered irrational. And within the large scope of things, I would like to go a step further here, even though this might perhaps not relate entirely to the question. Ultimately, the question we also need to ask is in which kind of environment we operate here, eventually drawing parallels to what Brecht had previously referred to, namely the question on not to what extent reality is objective or subjective, to quote the obvious. All right, shall we leave it there?
Okay. Any more comments? Here I see that Dante Bayona is presenting is recommending a paper by Roderick Long about 7 types of rationality. I don't know this paper, but Brecht seems to know it and says it's a good paper. So any more other comment?
Yes, I would like to give a comment.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pity that you did not compete for the Macrotrends Prize, because your theme about subjectivism, uncertainty, all that kind of stuff is really what I would like to promote. I don't want to monopolize this conference, but that is where we should go, I think. And I have a literature recommendation. Shackle. I don't know if you know Shackle.
No, not yet, but thank you.
Shackle. He was a student of Hayek at London School of Economics. It's a big book with small letters. But he talks about innovation and what Andras also said about the importance of not being rational along the lines that people think is rational. So you have to use imagination, think outside of the box, and then later on people see your rationality, but in the moment they cannot see it because they don't think like you.
Yeah.
And he turned Keynesian, which is a pity, but in his early days he was a full Austrian. And I recommend Shackle, The Epistemics of Economics, this book.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Maybe
that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Maybe next year I would like to compete with the Macrotrends prize.
Please do so.
Always thank you for your comments, Brecht.
Bye-bye.
Okay, any other comment?
I would like to comment one thing.
Sure.
And I have forgotten one very short comment, is words of von Baber, that the market process works on the very limit of exchangeability. I don't pronounce very well, but it's a key word. The standard market process with respect of each other works with exchanges, with resources on the very limit of exchangeability. That is, I mean that the cycle is because it is going of it is going more than that. The process, it is being forced. Sorry, it was just that point.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comment? No? Okay, then let's have a break and don't miss the keynote. It's 5:30. It will be a premiere because the script is written by Professor Huerta Soto, but it's starring Solis Huerta Soto. So don't miss that. That will be fantastic. So see you in half an hour.